Class 535, are you ready? Welcome. All right, paragraph number 61. I want to do one more paragraph. I did 2 paragraphs yesterday in yesterday's class, and I want to do one more. Paragraph 61. One thing I've learned over the years is that you should never swim against the current. If you see that your actions will not change the course of history, you're wasting your abilities by fighting against the tide. I don't agree with this paragraph. I wrote the paragraph myself, but I don't agree with it completely. Ni el 50%, I think. I don't agree. Yeah, one thing I've learned over the years is that you should never swim against the current. If you see that your actions will not change the course of history, you're wasting your abilities by fighting against the tide. Wow. This is an interesting, difficult paragraph. But again, I don't agree. One thing I've learned over the years, one thing that I have learned over the years, con el paso de los años, a lo largo de los años, una que he aprendido, una cosa que sí he aprendido, one thing I've learned, los británicos, one thing I've learned, con el paso de los años, over the years, through the years, over the years me gusta más. One thing I've learned over the years is that you should never swim against the current. To swim, and the water is coming in this direction, la corriente, no, the current, and you swim against the current, like the salmon, el salmón. Yeah, they swim against the current to go to their breeding ground, to die and to spawn new salmon. That's swimming against the current. One thing I've learned over the years is that you should never swim against the current. I don't necessarily agree. If you see that your actions will not change the course of history, you're wasting your abilities by fighting against the tide. All right. If you see that your actions will not change the course of history, come on. It's a bit too much. It's a bit exaggerated here. Mis acciones no van a cambiar el curso de la historia, así que estoy perdiendo el tiempo. Well, look, my actions. Are my actions almost 48 years teaching English in Spain? I ask you the question, have my actions changed the course of history? No, they haven't. Have my actions changed the English level in Spain? Very little, really. Maybe for a few people, yes. All right. But I continue swimming. Yeah. I continue teaching. I continue fighting. I continue making an effort. All right. Why not? It's fun. All right. So one thing I've learned, and so I don't agree with this. One thing I've learned over the years is that you should never, no deberías nunca, or no debes nunca, you should never swim against the current. You should never swim against the current. If you see that your actions will not change the course of history, you're wasting your abilities. Desperdiciando mis habilidades. Okay. You're wasting your abilities by fighting against the tide. To fight against the tide. The tide is the current, but except the tide is la marea marina que entra, the tide. Like King Canute. You remember King Canute? You know El Rey Canute? No? Yeah, he was a Scandinavian king, or Danish. Era danés o sueco. He was I think it was Danish, or Norwegian, maybe, but he's a Scandinavian king. And he was all powerful. And he said, take my throne to the beach. Su trono. I said, bam, they put it on the beach. And he said, he looked at the tide coming in. And he said, "Stop. I command you to stop." Didn't work. The king was not powerful enough to stop the tide. Tide, escrito tide, is la marea alta. High tide, low tide. The tide comes in, the tide goes out. If you build a sand castle on the beach. Have you ever built a sand castle on the beach? Castillo de Arena? Yeah, you built a sand. Yeah. If you build a sand castle on the beach, too close to the water, when the tide comes in, it will wash your castle away. And the tide rushes in and washes my castle away. Oh, yeah, the Moody Blues. Yes, the tide. To stop the tide. To fight against the tide. That means it's futile. Fútil, futilidad. Futility. It's futile. También se dice en inglés y se dice más que en español. Se dice más futile en inglés que fútil en español. Apenas se dice fútil aquí. Es fútil. Es una pérdida de tiempo. It's futile. You know the word fútil? Yeah? No? Okay, futilidad? No? Look in the dictionary tonight. That's Marta's homework. Futile. That means it's a waste of time. Pointless. Yes, pointless means es inútil. Parar la marea es una tarea inútil because you can't stop it. But this says, one thing I've learned over the years, esta expresión super socorrida, over the years, means a lo largo de los años, con el paso del tiempo. Over the years, over the years, over the years, over the years. Hay alternativas, pero esta es fantástica, over the years. Quédate con esta alternativa. Over the years, y siempre presente perfecto, si sigues vivo. Si estás hablando desde la tumba, hablando de tu vida anterior. Over the years, I learned, aprendí. Con el paso de los años, aprendí. Claro, in this case, you're dead. Con el paso de los años, he aprendido means you're still alive, right? Okay. So, over the years, I've learned, or I've learned over the years that you should never swim against the current. Yes. If you see that your actions will not change the course of history, you're wasting your ability fighting against the tide. Okay, I don't agree with that. And Don Quixote de la Mancha doesn't agree. Desfacer en tuertos. Yes. To live the impossible, to fight against windmills, to live the impossible dream. That is my dream, to follow that star, no matter how hopeless, no matter how far. All right. Seguir esa estrella, sin esperanza y por muy lejos que esté. I'm going to follow that star. So, una vez más. One thing I've learned, y esto no es mi filosofía, one thing I've learned over the years is that you should never swim against the current. If you see that your actions will not change the course of history, you're wasting your abilities by fighting against the tide. I don't agree. I don't agree. Every action you make you should think as if it could change the course of history. Yes. Yes. Imagine everything you do, imagine it could change the course of history. All right. Well, that's paragraph 61. Okay, my friend, are you ready for the focus pack for Learn to Speak Up? Learn to Speak Up, okay? List number 1. ¿La lista 1? ¿Será posible? No. Yes. List number 1. List number 1 on a new section. Segunda sección. Section 2, page 72. List number 1. Negative questions. Wow. Negative questions. Yeah. Negative questions. I'm not happy. Ask me why. Well, Richard, why aren't you? Aren't you? El hijo mayor de Carmenchu. Yeah, aren't you? Yeah, why aren't you happy? I'm not happy. Why aren't you happy? I'm not happy because I'm not rich. Oh, okay. Why aren't you rich? I'm not rich because I don't have any money. Why don't you have any money? Don't you? Otro hijo. El segundo, eh? Why don't you have any money? I don't have any money because I don't have a job. Why don't you have a job? Why don't you have a job? Well, I don't have a job because I can't find a job. Why can't you find a job? Why can't you find a job? Can't you? El quinto hijo. Why can't you find a job? I can't find a job because nobody wants to hire me. Nobody wants to hire me. Nadie me quiere contratar. Nobody wants to hire me. Pregunta, why doesn't anybody? Toma. Nobody wants to hire me. Why doesn't anybody want to hire you? Why doesn't anyone want to hire you? Nobody wants to hire me because I'm not qualified. No estoy cualificado. No reúno condiciones para nada. I'm not qualified. Oh, why aren't you qualified? Why aren't you? Why aren't you qualified? Well, I'm not qualified because I don't know how to do anything. I don't know how to do anything. Well, why don't you know how to do anything? Why don't you? Why don't you know how to do anything? I don't know how to do anything because I don't have an education. No tienes formación escolar, ni escolar. I don't have an education. I don't have an education. 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 And why don't you have an education? Why don't you have an education? Well, I don't have an education because I didn't go to school. You didn't go to school? No, I didn't go to school. Why didn't you? Es el tercer hijo de Carmenchu. Say, didn't you? Why didn't you go to school? I didn't go to school because I didn't have the opportunity to go. Well, why didn't you have the opportunity to go to school? Because I had to work. Why did you have to work? Well, I had to work because my father couldn't work. And why couldn't your father work? Well, he couldn't work because he couldn't find a job. And why couldn't your father find a job? Well, he couldn't find a job because he didn't know how to do anything. This is a vicious circle. As you say in Spain, una pescadilla que se muerde la cola. Vete a Latinoamérica a decir eso a los que te miren como. I remember in Peru decir, una pescadilla se muerde la cola. ¿Y eso qué es? They have no idea. All right. And I remember in Mexico, I say, un mogollón de gente. And was it, ¿qué es un mogollón? You know, we take for granted all of these expressions we have here in Spain, and they've never heard them there. Okay, so these are negative questions. All right. Now, we're on page 72, translation list 1. ¿Por qué no está hecho de madera? ¿Por qué no está hecho de madera? Why isn't it plastic? Why isn't it made of wood? Why isn't it? Con las preguntas negativas, siempre hay contracción obligatoria, mandatory, obligatory contraction. Why isn't it made of wood? ¿Por qué no están aquí ellos? Why aren't they here? Why aren't de las focas en el sol? Why aren't they here? ¿Por qué no están aquí? Why aren't they here? ¿Por qué no está ella contigo? Why isn't she with you? She's supposed to be with you. Why isn't she with you? I specifically instructed that she be with you. Now, why isn't she with you? She's supposed to be with you. Why isn't she with you? ¿Por qué no está él trabajando? Why isn't he working? He's supposed to be working. What's he doing? Why isn't he? Why isn't he working? Why isn't he working? Why isn't he? Fíjate cómo lo digo yo de corrido. Isn't he? Isn't he? Why isn't he? Why isn't he working? He's supposed to be working, not sitting doing nothing? Why isn't he working? ¿Por qué no somos los número uno? Why aren't we number one? I mean, we're the best in everything we do. Why aren't we number one? We should be number one. Deberíamos estar por encima de todos. We should. Why aren't we? Why aren't we? Aren't we? Twee. Why aren't we number one? ¿Por qué no fue más fácil? ¿Por qué no fue? Tenía que haber sido más fácil. ¿Por qué no fue más fácil? Why wasn't it easier? Why wasn't it easier? ¿Por qué no estaba donde yo lo puse? Yo lo puse aquí. ¿Por qué no estaba donde yo lo puse? Why wasn't it where I put it? I put it there. Why is it here? Why wasn't? ¿Por qué no estaba ayer? Estaba aquí. Pero yo lo puse ahí. ¿Por qué no estaba ahí? Donde yo lo puse. ¿Por qué no estaba donde yo lo puse? Yo lo puse aquí. Y cuando vine ayer estaba aquí. Why wasn't it where I put it? Why wasn't it where I put it? I put it there, specifically there. And when I came here, it was here. It wasn't supposed to be here. It was supposed to be there. Why wasn't it where I put it? Why wasn't it? El bolígrafo, por ejemplo. Why wasn't it where I put it? All right. ¿Por qué no estaba él listo? Why wasn't he ready? Come on. I mean, everybody was ready to go. Okay, it's time to go. The bus. Where's Charlie? He's not here. Why, this happened yesterday. Why wasn't he ready? Why wasn't he ready? ¿Por qué no estábamos incluidos? I skipped. Wow. I skipped number 10, Marta. I skipped from 9 to 11. Number 10. ¿Por qué no estaban aquí cuando llegué? Ellos. Why weren't they here when I got here? Why weren't they here when I got here? Why weren't they here when I arrived? Aquí dice arrived, para no ser redundante diciendo here dos veces. ¿Por qué no estaban aquí cuando yo llegué aquí? Claro, es súper redundante repetir aquí, pero en inglés casi lo decimos. Siempre. Why wasn't he here when I got here? Porque siempre vamos al verbo to get para llegar. No solemos decir arrive en plena batalla de hablar. We say get. Y get no significa llegar si no pones el destino, en este caso here. Why wasn't he here when I got here? 99% of the time, ¿por qué no estaban aquí cuando yo llegué? 99% of the time, a native person will say, why weren't they here when I got here? Repeating here. Y que valga en inglés la redundancia porque se hace. Why weren't they here when I arrived? Why weren't they here when I got here? ¿Por qué no estábamos incluidos? Why weren't we included? Why weren't we? Weren't we? Parece Pato Donald. Why weren't we? Why weren't we included? Weren't is contraction of were not. Why weren't we included? Los británicos, why weren't we included? What way? Pato Donald Inglés. All right. Why weren't we included? Why weren't we included? All right. ¿Por qué no fueron invitados? Why weren't they invited? What was the problem? Why weren't they invited? Why weren't they invited? ¿Por qué no hay más vino, eh? Why isn't there more wine? We've run out of wine. Yeah. That's what Mary said to her son Jesus. You remember, in the wedding ceremony, in the wedding banquet, they ran out of wine. All right? They ran out of wine. And Jesus' mother said, hey, Jesus, why isn't there more wine? And Jesus said, oh, there isn't any wine left? No. Well, don't worry. I'll transform the water into wine. And he produced a miracle, and he transformed the water into wine. All right. So it's not necessary. ¿Por qué no hay más vino? Why isn't there more wine? ¿Por qué no hay chicas en esta fiesta? Why aren't there any girls in this party? Come on, it's a normal party? Why aren't there any girls in this party? ¿Por qué no había un comité de control? ¿Por qué no había un comité de control? Why wasn't there? Es que no había. Why wasn't there a control committee or a steering committee? También se dice steering como manejar un vehículo. Why wasn't there a control committee? Why wasn't there a control committee? Why wasn't there a steering committee? All right, ¿por qué no había regalos para los obreros? Why weren't there any presents for the workers? Why weren't there any gifts for the workers? Gifts or presents? O sea, había regalos para los directores, pero no para los operarios. Why weren't there any gifts for the workers? ¿Por qué no vienes más a menudo? Why don't you come? Oh, mucha pregunta negativa aquí. Why don't you come? ¿Por qué no vienes más a menudo? Why don't you come more often? Yeah, why don't you join me on this class more often? You know, you want to improve your English. Well, come more often. Why don't you come more often? Hola, Blas. Hey, Marta, Blas is here. I haven't seen Blas in 2 months. Hey, Blas, where have you been? Why don't you come more often? You know, you always complain that you need to improve your English, but you only come de Pascuas a Ramos, right? Yeah, you only come every once in a while, once in a blue moon. You don't come very often. Why don't you come more often? Why don't you come more often? ¿Por qué no vienes más frecuentemente? Why don't you come more often? All right. ¿Por qué no te llama ella? Why doesn't she call you? I'm surprised. I mean, you're the boss. You have the answers, but she never calls you, right? No. She never calls me. Why doesn't she call you? I don't know. Ask her. Pregúntaselo. But she never calls me. Maybe she doesn't love me anymore. Yeah, maybe she has left me for another man. Maybe she doesn't love me anymore. Pero, ¿por qué no te llama ella? Why doesn't she call you? ¿Por qué no llueve aquí? Why doesn't it rain here? Why doesn't it rain here? Yeah, it's very typical. In Lima, Peru, the capital of Peru, the temperatures, the atmosphere is a little bit humid, but it never rains. I said, why doesn't it ever rain here? Strange climate, eh? Along the western coast of South America, the climate is a bit strange. Why doesn't it rain here? Why doesn't it ever rain here? Why doesn't it rain here? ¿Por qué no lo hace él mismo? Why doesn't he do it himself? Why do I have to do it for him? I always have to do it for him. He never does it himself. He never does it himself. I always have to do it for him. He always asks me to do it. Say, Richard, can you do this for me? Sure, Charlie, no problem. Why doesn't he do it himself? Why doesn't he do it himself? All right. Estas preguntas son estos. Tiene un ejercicio brutal del verbo auxiliar. All right. ¿Por qué no utilizan el sistema nuevo? Why don't they use the new system? Para eso está. The new system, they still go back to the old system. They say, use the new system. But they always go back to the old system because they know it. They don't want to learn the new system. The new system is better than the old system, but they know the old system. This is a typical problem in migrating from one system to another. ¿Por qué no aprenden? Dicen, ¿por qué no utilizan el sistema nuevo? Why don't they use the new system? What's the problem? You need to remove the old system completely. Then they have no choice. Then they have no choice but to use the new system. If you keep both systems operating with the idea of a transition, they will never transition. They'll never migrate completely to the new system because they'll always go back to the old one. You have to eliminate or to remove the old system, and then they'll be forced to use the new system. ¿Por qué no utilizan this? Why don't they? Why don't they? Why don't they use the new system? ¿Por qué no esperamos hasta mañana? Eh? Why don't we wait until tomorrow? Why don't we wait until tomorrow? Tomorrow's better, Marta. Why don't we wait until tomorrow to finish this list? What do you think? Let's wait until tomorrow. We have only 1 minute left. Why don't we wait until tomorrow? ¿Por qué no funciona? ¿Por qué no funciona? Why doesn't it work? It's broken. I know, but why doesn't it work? Why doesn't it work? It doesn't work because it doesn't work. ¿Por qué no fuiste? Why didn't you go? ¿Por qué no fuiste ahí? Why didn't you go? Why didn't you go? I didn't go because I didn't want to. ¿Y por qué no nos llamaron? Okay. Why didn't they call us? Why didn't they call us? Why didn't you go? Why didn't they call us? Whew. A lot of negative questions. Richard, yes. Why don't you say goodbye? Okay, I'll say goodbye. Goodbye.